All right, so a little bit about our session today. The harvest is part of our 10,000 pounds of cotton project. It's a project of Solid State Clothing and TS Designs, in which we source cotton directly from a North Carolina cotton farmer at a fair price, above market price. And we're making it into premium t-shirts entirely in North and South Carolina. And so this series is part of our commitment to transparency. And that means that we are inviting you to visit and see every piece of our supply chain, get a chance to see behind the businesses and talk to the people who work there and ask them questions. So it takes 7 different steps to make a t-shirt, at least our t-shirts. And each of those steps happens at a different business that specializes in that particular step of the making. So far, we've been following our t-shirts as they get made. We started with a visit with cotton farmer Andrew Burleson. We saw cotton ginning at Rolling Hills Gin, learned about how the cotton is spun into yarn at the Spun Lab division of Parkdale Mills. And last month we were at Contempora Fabrics, where the yarn is knit into fabric. And so today we're going to be learning about fabric finishing, which is a really important step in making the cotton fabric that we make feel really great, and one of the things that makes our t-shirts really awesome. And if you missed any of those previous sessions, you can catch up by watching recordings on the TS Designs YouTube channel. At the end of this session, I'll be sharing a bunch of links, and I will include a link to that YouTube channel. So now I want to introduce you to TS Designs President Eric Henry, and he's going to give us a quick overview of why we created the 10,000 pounds of cotton project. So Eric, go right ahead.
Thank you, Courtney. And again, a big shout out to Courtney because this is her first time moderating our conversation. She's been in the background pushing all the right buttons, and now she's in front of the screen. And I'm your on the road cotton reporter for TS Designs and down here in Gaffney, South Carolina. But really why this is important. And, this is one of the things that is, as we went through COVID, and hopefully by next month, we'll all be vaccinated up and we can start having, people in the conversation, not these, remote conversations. I assure you, Stacey's sitting safely 6 feet away from me right now. And, but the reason we want to do this is we want to bring awareness of the people that come together to make our apparel. Because one thing I like to say, and one thing I've learned with COVID, it's typically apparel brands today are doing 2 things. They're either chasing a cheap price for a big box store, the race to the bottom, what I like to describe. And that's why 98% of the clothes about it you may receive is chasing that cheap, unsustainable, cheap labor. But the other thing is it's illusion of a lifestyle. What we want to do with the 10,000 pound cotton project is, first of all, bring the farmer to the table. Believe it or not, if you know anything about commodity agriculture, the cotton farmer has 0 say in the price in which they get paid for their cotton. 0. So the person has the most investment, the most time, the most important person's conversation has no say so in price. So when I was talking to Andrew Burleson this time last year, when that COVID was, kind of reaching out, this is a cotton farmer in Stanley County, North Carolina, we've been working with for probably over 12 years, 13 years. They're 3rd generation. We're now working with the 3rd generation, 3,000 acres of cotton. Literally, Andrew was putting his seed in the ground 25 cents under his cost. And he kept saying, I hope for good weather. I hope for better price. I hope. The most important person in our conversation is depending on hope. So the purpose of the 10,000 pound project was to meet the farmer in the field before the seed goes in the ground. And then also we want to go through the supply chain, as Courtney was talking about, from the farmer, the ginner, the spinner, the knitter, and now we're at Carolina Cotton Works. It's the people behind the scenes that make it happen. So what we want to do with 10,000 pound cotton project, which we have big plans to grow it much, much bigger next year, is to educate the buyer and the consumer about the supply chain. Because if it wasn't for those people in that supply chain, we wouldn't have a product. TS Design would not exist. So we want to talk about transparent supply chain, in a local economy, ultimately to build a more resilient future. Because somewhere in the future, we're going to be faced with some other global disruption. And we can grow, process, and manufacture cotton here in the Carolinas. So what we want to do is take you along this journey, meet the people that make it possible, and hopefully as you become better educated, then you can go to your customers or your family or friends or whatever and tell what we're doing here, so we can basically make our community stronger and support the cotton farmers that live in our communities. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you so much, Courtney, for jumping in and filling those big shoes that Amy left us.
Thanks so much, Eric. I just want to invite anyone who's joined, since I said this last, to invite, I'd like to invite you to share where you're coming from and who you are in the chat. It's really great to see people from North and South Carolina, but also New York City, Kansas City, and Wisconsin. It's really great to have you from all over the country. I see it's sunny and warm in New York City. It is here too. It's awesome. Hope it's like that in Wisconsin, and if not, soon. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Stacey, and it's going to involve a little bit of switcheroo with. Here we go.
Yep.
I thought it was going to be a lady.
We read your mind.
All right. So we're going to start our conversation with a short video that's going to show what goes on at Carolina Cotton Works, some of the equipment and what it looks like behind the scenes. And then we're going to start some Q&A with Stacey. So sit tight. We're going to have a video here in a second.
For over 2 decades, we've been made to finish, made to deliver quick turnaround. With a wide array of skill and capabilities for dyeing and finishing, CCW is your trusted partner for your fabric needs. We offer the highest level of quality and customer service, competitive pricing, and environmental sustainability. At CCW, we take great pride in supplying some of the world's best brands, producing quality fabrics for numerous industries, including performance apparel, automotive interiors, medical fabrics, military apparel, team sports uniforms, and flame-retardant workwear. CCW continues to be a trailblazer in the textile industry by offering a wide variety of fabric styles and the best quality and delivery in the industry. Carolina Cotton Works is made to finish.
All right. So I really liked all of that footage and the great music.
Yeah, we were jamming with our video.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stacey, thanks for joining us. And to start, can you tell us a little bit about Carolina Cotton Works? So what's the history of the business and how did you get to where you are now?
So Carolina Cotton Works was founded in 1995 by Paige Ashby and his 2 sons, Hunter Ashby and Brian Ashby, along with Joe Gano. And the vision back in 1995 is that we would bleach and scour fabric for the garment dye industry. So when we started in 1995, we had a continuous bleach range and 7 garment dye machines. And soon after we got into business, we added a piece dye machine, otherwise known as a fabric dyeing machine. And as the garment dye business started to drop off, we decided to invest more in our fabric dyeing. And at that time, we were doing all body size fabric. So we were blessed enough to continue to grow each year. So we would add dye machines just about every year for body size fabrics up until around 2005. And in 2005, the knitted mattress ticking business became very popular. So we bought a tenor frame, which got us into the open width business. And at the same time, another partner that's working with TS Design's Contemporary Fabrics asked us if we could do their polyester dyeing for performance fabrics. So then we started investing in what we call our horizontal dye machines or soft flow dye machines. made to run performance polyester and polyspandex. And for maybe 6 years in a row, we invested purely in synthetics. And then around 3 years ago, we saw the cotton market start to come back. So we bought another machine designed to dye cotton fabrics. And it was a newer machine which dyed fabric at a lower liquor ratio. And so through the years, which I was one of our original supervisors, and knew Hunter, Brian, and Paige a very long time, we've just been fortunate enough to grow. And when people ask us, can you do this? We normally find a way to do it. And so that's how when you look at the video, you see us running body size fabric, fashion, team apparel, automotive, flame retardant. It's because that most of the time, if somebody gives us a challenge, we're pretty competitive and we go for it. And for that reason, we've been able to keep growing every year since 1995. And even last year, we added new equipment. And then just last week, we bought another dye machine.
Great. Thanks so much. So fabric finishing, for us at TS Designs and Solid State Clothing, it's the 5th of 7 steps in our supply chain. So can you tell us a bit about the kind of finishing you're doing for the knit fabric for our 10,000 pounds of cotton project, and why fabric finishing is an important step?
So the fabric finishing is very important, and we learned that back from our start because we did so much fabric finishing for the garment dye industry. So fabric finishing for people that are doing garment dyeing, you're taking gray fabric, which you saw from Contemporary Fabrics, which is fabric that has been knit, and it comes to us in rolls of fabric. And then when it leaves here, we have the fabric finished in a non-optic bleach. So we're taking hydrogen peroxide and caustic soda to bleach the fabric. We choose not to put optical on the fabric. And what we're doing is we're establishing the width, the weight of the fabric, and then we control the shrinkage so that TS Designs has a garment that they can constantly hit a specific weight. So we've gotten very good through the years because we've never stopped running prepare for garment dye fabric. And we're able to give customers fabric so that when they garment dye, they know they're going to be very consistent when it comes to width, weight, color. But not only that, the shrinkage is important. So when Eric is garment dyeing the t-shirt, he doesn't want the hem to shrink up 2 inches. So the fabric finishing part of the process, out of the steps that you mentioned, we feel is the most important. No, just kidding. But it is very important to get the t-shirt spec that he's trying to meet in the end.
Great, thanks so much for that explanation. And just for all of you tuning in, so we're talking a little bit about garment dyeing, and that means that we dye the t-shirts once they've already been sewn and put together. So we're not getting red fabric and blue fabric and green fabric and cutting it into t-shirts. We do it afterwards. One of the reasons we like to do that is it means that all of our shirts are pre-shrunk. So, so it's really important to have this fabric finishing to make sure that when we get our shirts and dye them, they're going to stay nice shirts and be the size and shape we want them to be. So Carolina Cotton Works started business in 1995, and that was 1 year after NAFTA came into full effect. And so how did Carolina Cotton Works survive as a business at a time when so much of the textile industry was moving overseas?
So I get that question a good bit because everybody wonders about the timing of why we started Carolina Cotton Works in 1995 and then how we were able to survive. And the best answer I can give them is we missed the glory days. And so most of our competitors that were running in the 70s and 80s were used to having business come to them, turning away orders. When we first started out, we had to fight very hard for every order that we had, and we considered every customer to be very important. And so when you miss those glory days, you have to work a little bit harder. So we actually outworked our competitors, in my opinion. And in doing so, we became faster with better quality and established a reputation of having high integrity. And that allowed us, when they would say no to programs and we would say yes, as programs moved offshore, we were able to diverse when they did not, when they didn't want to diverse. And so that allowed us to expand into a lot of different fabrics while we watched a lot of our competitors go out of business.
Yeah, that's really interesting and sort of related. Well, actually, before I go to the next question, I want to invite everyone attending to, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and I'll be sending those over to Stacey. So, but next, so on the Carolina Cotton Works website, it says that the company is invested in production equipment that saves energy and water and reduces carbon emissions and landfill waste. So can you tell us a little more about that equipment and why you all decided it was a worthwhile investment?
So as we grew as a U.S. textile company, you had to compete with, we're competing with other domestic companies, but we were also competing with companies down in Mexico and Central America. And so cost was very important. And so when we first started out, you're always trying to reduce the amount of water that you use, the energy that you use in order to reduce costs. So we feel like we were sustainable before sustainable was cool. So the equipment that we purchased was, an example, we take all of our exit water, which is very hot, and we used it to heat up the incoming water from the city. So we can gain 15 or 20 degrees of heat without using any energy at all. And then all of the investments that we use are for equipment that runs our dye machines and dye dispensing system, so that there's very little waste in the dyeing process. And so our waste is very limited. And then all of the heat that we use and for our drying and for our steam is used with natural gas, which is very clean burning natural gas. And then all of the wastewater that we have, it's not like we can just dump it wherever we want to. All of our wastewater goes back into the city and is regulated. And so we adjust the pH and it goes back into the city of Gaffney, which turns back into drinking water. And so we consider ourselves very sustainable because it's important, and also because it helps us reduce costs.
Yeah, I think that's really great that, what is good for business can also be good for our environmental sustainability. It seems like so often people think of them as in competition with each other. So you've been in the textile industry for a while. Carolina Cotton Works has been around for a couple of decades now. What do you wish more consumers knew about the American textile industry?
So what I wish more consumers and brands knew about the textile industry is that the U.S. textile industry existed, because a lot of people will move from Asia straight to Central America or South America, forgetting that there is a strong, thriving U.S. textile industry that's here in the Carolinas that can help with speed. So a lot of companies now are learning that speed is just as important as cost. And so we've been fortunate for the brands and retailers to realize that you can lower inventory by using manufacturing closer to home. And so what I wish people knew is that we existed here, and that's why we're excited to be a part of this, because you're explaining from start to finish, the cotton to spinning to knitting to dyeing and finishing to cut and sew to the garment dyeing. A lot of people don't realize that that industry is here and still not only here but growing.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. So folks out there, feel free to ask questions. So Nicole is asking, have you seen more US-based brands looking to source more local due to the pandemic?
So I was just telling Eric earlier that, last year, like most other companies, we pivoted to making, I think we made enough fabric for 125 million masks, and then we're making gown fabrics, but we also started to see the importance of Made in USA. And so most all of our customers now that have Made in USA have value. So the retailers now are not only looking for Made in USA, but they're looking for high quality Made in USA products that are sustainable, with the story to tell. So they're finding it very interesting to learn what Eric is teaching. So they want to know where the cotton comes from, what the spinning process is in the yarn, how fabric is knit. And so the more the customer is educated, the more interested they are in buying a made in USA garment. So we have definitely seen our business grow with all of our made in USA customers. And for us, we have about 30% of our fabric that ships domestically, about 33% or so that ships to Mexico, and then the rest down to Central America. But we have seen that shift move back toward the United States, which we feel is a win.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so you also see, in addition to pandemic related switches, I think you were mentioning before that you're also just noticing a greater awareness of domestically produced apparel and other textile products. So when did you notice that happening?
We've always had made in USA customers, but here in the last 2 years is when made in USA started to come back and become popular. Here in the last 6 months, because most people were staying at home during the pandemic, I feel like they got more educated and had more time to research where the garment's coming from, what impact it has on the environment. And as people started researching the history of a t-shirt, we saw the value of made in USA start to increase. And that's when the brands that we work with that are making for made in USA started seeing growth, even a lot more growth than they've had probably ever, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think people were sitting at home looking at, they got to educate themselves on t-shirts, and they started finding out that, especially shirts that were made in Asia, they got to see not only that, you can go out and buy a cheap t-shirt, but what is that doing to the environment? And as they educated themselves, it tracked back to a Made in USA program where you could actually track the garment.
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the things that's really important for us because, I think, and I'd love to hear from the folks who in the audience, what sort of education you'd like to have to understand how apparel gets made better. Because I think one thing that it's easy to not know all of the steps it takes. And when that production is happening so far away, it's really hard to know how that's being done and if the people are being treated well and whether or not, the dyes are being dumped in the local river. And, here we know because you're our neighbors and we, Eric is there. And if you were dumping your dyes in the river, we'd be able to see it.
I would find out about it very quickly.
And that's the thing I like to say too, Stacey, you're saying it is that, it's one of the silver linings of COVID, because it's a lot easier to have this conversation of the importance of made in USA now because of COVID, because of people awareness. It was I would say it was a tougher conversation pre-COVID, because when you have that made in USA conversation, from our perspective, people quickly go to price. What costs more? Well, what COVID did is show the disruption of us chasing a cheaper price in a global supply chain, which just crashed and burned in COVID. So I think it is making that conversation more people are aware of, as you said earlier. People are, where's this stuff coming from? I can't get. Oh, it's coming from far away place. We can do it right here and support my community. So I think it's made the conversation, and what you're saying, you're having more of those conversations because of COVID.
And the consumer started to learn that whether they're buying cotton from the USA or whether they're buying organic cotton or whether they're buying recycled polyester, when it's made in the USA, there's proof and there's traceability. When it's coming out of Pakistan or Asia, you may think you're buying organic cotton or you may think you're buying recycled polyester, but prove it.
Yeah.
And so with the US supply chain, there's proof.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm going to comment from someone, perhaps COVID created more awareness about supply chains in general, especially garment workers making masks. Yeah, I want to say I think that's absolutely true, especially because there was a shortage of masks in the beginning. Suddenly people we're asking, well, why is that happening? How are we not able to produce what we need? And people had to suddenly think about things like supply chains.
That's right.
So Devin's asking, he says, a little off topic as far as your partnership with TS Design Solid State goes, but would you mind telling us about your son's entrepreneurship during the pandemic?
Yeah.
It's very inspiring. It gives us hope for the next generations and speaks volume about you as a dad.
I was gonna just let Devin give the interview since he knows so much about me and Carolina Cotton Works. But my son left college from USC Carolina, and he decided that he was going to get in the mask business. So he took all of his savings and wanted to import some masks from China. And so, I said, you're never going to see those masks. You might as well take that money out back and burn it. So that was Dad's advice. But he got his mask in, and he sold all of them within one day. And then so he had a big, I told you so. And so he actually started a mask company. And I said, look, if you're going to do this, do it the right way and do it with Made in USA masks. And so he took some of our fabric and some of our cut and sew partners, and he started his own mask company called Roslick Safety, and ended up on some local TV channels in Greenville and Columbia. Thought he was a rock star, but at first I had to admit I was wrong, and second I had to admit I was very proud of him for taking the initiative to not just sit at home during the COVID and do nothing, but he went out there and created a business, an LLC, did the sales, and so he had a very successful time and enjoyed it, and I had fun doing that with him. And knowing that the fabric came from Carolina Cotton Works and that he was using cut and sew facilities that we knew made it even better. And even though he goes to USC, me being a Clemson graduate, apparently he doesn't listen to me at all. So.
Yeah, and that is, well, I'll have to give Devin credit. That is a great story. So, Jenny Hopkins says, does he need an internship? So this is becoming a business networking event, which is great. I like it. Well, and that brings up an interesting topic, which is, what do you see? Do you see younger people interested in the textile industry? And do you see there continuing to be that being developed in educational institutions and other public institutions to support that?
So in years past, most of the younger generation would get into design and merchandising, right? Because it was the cool thing to do for design and merchandising. But now we're starting to see more of that younger generation that's getting into what we would call the sourcing part of it. And so the sourcing part of making t-shirts, fashion apparel, team sports is becoming popular again. So we are starting to see that younger generation get back into the textile and apparel business because it's becoming more popular for the Made in USA. They're starting to learn about it, and they're starting to find out not only that it's an interesting business, but how much is involved in taking yarn all the way through to the final product.
That's great. So Krista asks, she says, I know so little about this that I hesitate to ask, but does the government, especially with Biden's Build Back Better focus, that's a fun one to say, is the government doing anything to promote US grown cotton and garments made in the US? And what about state governments in North Carolina and South Carolina?
So I wouldn't say so much for Trump or Biden or the president, but there's a cotton sourcing group is federally funded, and their sole purpose is to help sell US grown cotton. And so we're a member of that organization. It's a federally funded organization, and they put brands and retailers in touch with fabric vendors, yarn vendors, people like us. And so they do a really good job of putting the retailers along with it. And that is a federally funded organization that helps sell US cotton. So they do a very good job of that.
And you're not talking about Cotton Incorporated, are you?
Not Cotton Incorporated.
Okay. What's that organization's name?
Von Jordan Cotton Sourcing USA.
Okay. I'm not familiar with them.
They do an outstanding job. But a lot of our businesses come from them, and they usually hold a couple events each year. So they've done an outstanding job. But we have seen, Made in USA became popular, I guess, a few years ago. And we've seen that trickle on, and we do expect the Biden administration to keep things going. We we were able to run a lot of masks for FEMA, which kind of kept us going last year, which is a big part of our, through all of COVID, Carolina Cotton Works never took a week off. So we've been running all throughout COVID and been able to employ our 150 to 200 employees. And that's been important to us because as a family-owned business, it's important that we can keep our workers here working and supporting their families. And so that was a big help.
And a side note to that, jumping here real quick, Courtney, and you were talking about earlier, Stacey, I forgot how many years we go back. Well, you got,
yeah, I think I met Eric. We were trying to think it was 1997, I believe, which kind of ages both of us.
Yeah, but it was because, again, Joe Gano, that was before we did garment dyeing. He was the big garment dyer in the South at that time.
That's right.
I forgot the name of his
Garment Technologies.
Yep. I mean, that. And then, again, I knew Paige Ashby at that time, where his sons run the business now, but they were not, were they in the business at that time?
No. So
Okay.
Hunter, his youngest son, and I were both living together in Rockingham, North Carolina, both in the weaving business, and his son Brian was in USC in the accounting business. And so we all got together, and Paige, he wanted to hire youth because he wanted to teach us about quality and integrity and fabric. He didn't want to bring in a lot of old people that were set in their ways. And so we had a lot of new supervisors at the time.
Yeah, but Paige was a great guy, and he passed away in
Paige passed away in October of 2019. His son, Brian Ashby, has become president of the company. His brother, Hunter Ashby, they run the company now. They do an outstanding job. Brian oversees more of the sales and the financial side. Hunter oversees more of the production side. And so just like Paige, they have the same mindset that their dad taught them, which is integrity is important as quality. And if you're not growing, you're going backwards. And so we still continue to thrive under their leadership.
Well, I was honored when I pulled up this morning in a park beside Paige's parking place is still out there with a sign on there. So
they'll always be here.
Yeah. So it brings back memories, of coming back down here and touring the facility in the early days and seeing you grow. But yeah, it's good that they made that transition and it kept on growing. So anyway, but I know we go back a long time and, you have been a critical partner for us and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
So just a couple more things from the chat. So Devin points out that the U.S. Cotton Trust Protocol is all about sustainable U.S. cotton, and that's a relatively new program. I know I can't remember, Stacey, if Carolina Cotton Works is part of that. I know Contempora and maybe someone else in our supply chain is, but just for our audience, that's something interesting to look into. It's really just launched in the last year. Elizabeth asks, she says, we're hearing a lot about a decrease in availability of organic and goat certified cotton from overseas, India and China. Do you see your business adding goat certification to your offerings so suppliers in the US have places to find domestic textiles?
So organic, right now, we're running organic cotton, hemp cotton, and normal cotton. And so the shortages domestically are due to a lot of orders that are coming in for the yarn manufacturers. So they're not able to get the output to keep up with the orders that they have. But we have seen the increase in organic cotton, hemp, and those fibers, whether they're 100% organic or they're blended in with cotton. That industry, in my opinion, will continue to grow.
But I think it's in that whole conversation that we always have a lot is this need for certification.
Well, so
but who's going to pay for it, and does customers see the value of it? Because I mean, it used to be there's GOTS, there's Blue Sign, there's Okotex. I mean, there's all these certifications which you can probably qualify for, but it takes time and effort. I mean, if you want to talk about the certification.
We've been through most of those certifications, and an interesting fact is that if you look at the amount of organic apparel sold worldwide, there's more organic apparel sold worldwide than organic cotton grown. And so that's the reason that traceability is so important, because it is too easy for somebody to put organic on a piece of paper and sell you normal cotton.
And that's
Yeah,
why we like to balance what we do, Stacey, is this transparency.
Transparency and
we
traceability.
we tell our people where it comes from. So there is a person called Stacey at Carolina Cotton Works in Gaffney, South Carolina. So that information is available to anybody. You exist.
Yeah.
And we think that builds more trust to having that, and plus being domestic, than you having a certification that you're doing. Now, again, I'm not downplaying certification, but we really believe in that transparency of this is the company, this is the person. You can go see them, and it's not this secret black box that you don't know, that especially when you're working overseas. You said earlier that organic cotton, is it organic? You know, I've got organic. I get a piece of paper that says it is.
That first container might have been
Yeah.
organic. I don't know about that second,
Exactly,
third.
exactly.
Yeah, someone else says, I agree with Elizabeth, goats is the standard in the rest of the world. It would seem that in order to truly be globally competitive, you would need to be goat certified. You know, I think that's an interesting point, and there actually have been there are some, you know, organic is one measure of sustainability, and there are a lot of other measures, certifications and measures of sustainability that have been appearing and are sort of catching on. I think the Higg Index is one.
Mhm.
So I think it's interesting. I think it's the most well-known standard, but it's not the only one in the industry, and it also might not continue to be the most well-known.
I mean, we've done work with the GOTS certified organic cotton in the past, and anytime you can certify something, we feel that that's important. It's being able to prove something is very important to us. It's one of the reasons we like to use Reprieve for our recycled polyester, because in that there's actually DNA markers, so you
Right.
can make a t-shirt, send that back out to Unify where the fiber is made, and they'll tell you if it actually contains the Reprieve polyester. And so what you'll see happening over the next few years is traceability in cotton. And so they're trying to find ways now that you can trace cotton where it comes from, so that the transparency is there. Right now, the transparency is there more on the synthetic side than it is the natural fiber side.
That's really interesting.
But we're coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know at TS Designs and Solid State, we talk a lot about certifications and sustainability and ethical production. And there are a lot of interesting discussions happening about why it's not as easy as it sounds for farmers and American farmers in particular to go organic. There's an article we've referenced before in some of our blog posts that I'll have to send around in the wrap up for this, by a sustainable fashion advocate and journalist that basically really delves into why it's really hard to ask American farmers to go organic. And the basic summary is it takes a lot of investment to do that, and they're not getting any support from anyone for that investment. So brands aren't stepping up, the federal government's not stepping up. You know, if we want to see farmers grow organic cotton, we have to start putting pressure on brands to get American organic cotton and learn a little bit more about farming. You know, there was I don't know a lot about this, but I know there was a pilot program to grow organic cotton in North Carolina that didn't really take off because it's really hard to grow cotton without, you know, synthetic pesticides and herbicides in North Carolina. Most organic cotton comes from northern Texas, where it's basically a desert and insects don't survive very well.
And again, that's why we want to have the cool thing about what we've done here. Stacey knows this because he was there the first time we went there was cotton to the Carolinas.
That's right.
Where we were buying the cotton from the farmer, and as we say, converted dirt to shirt in about 500 miles. And what COVID did is basically bring that back up and the importance of it, because it's more important now than ever to have that transparency. But the thing that I think, and again, you were there for cotton to the Carolinas, is just cool to have that relationship within the supply chain. You know, a lot of times you are making, you know, you're getting yarn from all these different people, and you're doing your fabric, or excuse me, you're getting fabric from all these different places, and then and then finishing on yours a very important person. But with Cotton and Carolinas and with the 10K, you see all the players. You know the farmer, you know the ginner, you know the spinner, you know the knitter, and I think that's pretty cool too, because it's that internal relationship that you can build, not just with the customers, but also with the supply chain doing it, because we want to all be successful. So there might be something that you see that say, hey, Andy at Partnell or whatever, we're having this problem, or Jennifer at Contempora. There's no secrets. Our supply chains. You know where everything's coming from. So it's not like this truck pulls up to your back parking lot and here's your fabric, finish it. You have no idea where it came from. But this is in building on that local connection of transparency. I think it's been great, and we again appreciate all what y'all done to be with us all those years.
The most important part of it for us is, in case most of you don't know, but you can buy a Made in USA t-shirt, but that doesn't mean that the fabric comes from the United States. That means that it could be imported fabric sewn in the United States. So the reason that we're so excited about what Eric is doing is the transparency is you're not only providing traceability for the sewing and the garment dyeing that he's doing, but that the fabric and the yarn and the knitting and dyeing are all done in the United States as well. There's a lot of companies that like to wave the Made in USA flag, but they're using fabric that's imported from other countries.
And Devin probably knows more about this than us, but I mean, technically you can do that and still be, it's not illegal to do that.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
But the way they spin the marking on, because, they talk about the Made in USA and
because it's sewn.
Right. But they don't have to tell where the fabric came from some other place and stuff like that.
That's
so
right.
It's sometimes the consumer can be fooled because of the marketing behind the product and the lack of transparency.
And that's why the education and the transparency are so important for the complete Made in USA garment.
That was the side note. I bought a pair of jeans from a company. I will not embarrass them on this show here, but I've always loved their jeans. There's a basic, like a Levi 501 work jean, and Made in USA, rah, rah, rah. And I got my last pair, and I opened up the tab. Fabric came from China.
Yeah.
Oh man. So anyway, but again, you don't see that on any of their advertising, any of the thing. And again, it's not legal what they're doing now, but you had to look for it. And then I did, anyway, but that's the challenges that we fight in this industry, is that, and again, what we're hoping to do here, a better educated customer is a better customer, and give them that information, tell them to look beyond the label and ask the question, because you end up with those jeans that I did. I mean, I got fooled buying these jeans and they're made in China. I mean, the fabric was. Yeah.
We see it all the time.
Yeah. And they say, well, how you get them so much cheaper? Well, you got us exactly how they did it cheaper.
They import the fabric.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, there are a couple of other great comments in the chat related to farming. Someone says healthy soil is key, and that's absolutely true. Andrew Burleson, our farmer for 10,000 pounds of cotton, people have asked us, he's not a certified organic grower, but he does do no-till farming and cover cropping. And where he is in Stanley County, that kind of makes him a radical. So I think, and someone else says, yes, I agree so much with your point about the disconnect between farmers and brands, but more and more brands are waking up to this and going to be unable to find organic cotton. I'm hoping that there can be more support for farmers. It is so important. And domestic supply chain is so exciting. And yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And, I know for us at TS Designs and Solid State, our goal is to keep improving and figure out how we can support those farmers so that they can continue to do things in an even more sustainable way while still managing to make a living for themselves and their families. So that's absolutely one of our goals. And that's why we hope that we can do things like grow 10,000 pounds into 100,000 pounds. Because the more we get brands to the table supporting these efforts, the more farmers are going to be able to improve their own practices that are, do practices that are more sustainable. There's another question from Karis. Within this new wave of Made in USA demand, are there any weak links within the Southeastern supply chain that need more investment? For example, cut and sew.
Yes.
We were talking about that earlier today.
today. So there's always West Coast sewing versus East Coast sewing, and there's a larger labor pool on the West Coast than there are on the East Coast. But there's investments being made on the East Coast for sewing, but there's no doubt that we need more sewing on the East Coast. The customers that we're dealing with now, a lot of the bottleneck is the sewing and people needing more sewing. But we're all having our own staffing issues right now because most companies right now are very busy and we're having trouble finding labor.
So what do you think?
Stacey, we will make sewing cool again. So, we said that earlier, Courtney, is that, that is our bottleneck. We make more t-shirts on the West Coast than we would like to make. We want it closer home. And that is our issue. It's not a problem with the cotton or the ginning or the spinning or the knitting or the finishing, but we can't, here. So we are making even a further commitment to bring more back here. But as I like to say, we will make sewing cool again. We want people to, have a great living wage job, be able to make a career out of this thing. But it's important. And I think people just don't realize, I think Courtney knows this firsthand. I mean, sewing, go do it yourself. It's like, you think food's cheap, go grow some vegetables. Well, think sewing's easy, go sew some stuff. So learn from experience. But I think I think is the big missing piece. If we can figure out, how to bring more of that sewing here, because it is frustrating for us to make as many shirts as we have to make on the West Coast, just because, we have to have t-shirts and we have not figured out that piece here yet, but we're definitely working on it.
So that the sewing capacity on the East Coast is growing. So I know of investments that are being made. It just can't happen fast enough.
And so are most of those, is that mostly private investment? Is it government supported economic development?
Most of it's private that I know of.
But we're hoping, what I'm hearing out of the Biden administration, there could be some potential federal help to address that. Because again, it's like everything. If you want this to happen, this is the issue, that we need to be addressed, and we're going to need. It needs to be a big investment, a long-term investment, and I think because what's happening, more people are aware of it now. Again, because of COVID, it's kind of masked over. Now we're starting to put pressure on the Made in USA system, and that the weakness of cut and sew is surfacing up pretty quickly. The one that we need to be addressing. The
government has the tools for Made in USA because we do a lot of military fabrics that go for the United States Army, the Navy, the Marines, and it's all under the Berry Amendment. Mm-hmm. And so the plan is for the government to take other products and use them similar to the Berry Amendment, where it's all made in the United States.
Right. And can you explain what the Berry Amendment is for?
Berry Amendment just means it has to be made fully in the United States. If it's a we do the gold polyester T-shirt for the U.S. Navy, so it has to be U.S. yarn, U.S. fabric, U.S. sewing thread, complete USA. So anytime you see Berry Amendment, it has to be 100% made in the USA. And the government put that in place a very long time ago. In case you went to war, you wouldn't want to go to war with a country where your T-shirts are being made or your guns are being made. And so the Berry Amendment came out to make sure that they're sourcing key products in the United States. So they have the procedures set up. They just have to apply them to more products.
And I was telling Stacey earlier, we do the wool berets, the military wears. We are involved with that for that program for the garment dye side of it. And I was talking to somebody yesterday that's in that procurement part of that. But the nice thing about that is it sets the bar. Is you still compete with the U.S., but that's what you're competing with in the U.S.
Right.
Compared to when a lot of your programs, they say, well, Stacey, here's the fabric here, and we're getting this right now from Pakistan, and we're getting it for X, and this is what I need you to compete with, which, it's apples and oranges in comparison. So with this, the Berry Amendment, it's all level playing for you're competing with, it's USA business. So somebody else in the USA compete with you, but that definitely levels the playing field, I like to say.
Right.
Yeah, and on the subject of supply chain and cut and sew, Zach says To echo that, we need more cut and sew in the Midwest. The demand is there, but the talent isn't. Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe the talent's there and it just hasn't been developed.
Now we have customers out in the Midwest as well. I mean, so we have customers from the East Coast to the West Coast and everywhere in between. So you're right. It's not that we want more sewing on the East Coast versus the West Coast. We would like to see more U.S. sewing altogether from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Midwest. We just need more sewing. The yarn, knitting, dyeing capacity, we're growing, right? So the sewing is where we need the capacity quickly. Because, we have enough equipment here that we can increase production fairly quickly. So can the yarn producers, the knitters and the weavers. They have the equipment to produce a lot more. And sewing, we need that equipment along with the sewers.
Yeah, just for everyone attending, if you're interested in learning more about cut and sew here on the East Coast, the next stop of the harvest in April is going to be at Opportunity Threads in Morganton, North Carolina. They're doing the cut and sew for the 10,000 pounds of cotton project. So they're a good example of a success story with local cut and sew, and the woman in charge there, Molly Hemstreet, will be a great person to talk to about that stuff. So let's see, one more question, and then I think we'll be wrapping up. As people have become more educated about supply chain issues, there has been an increase in overseas audit fatigue. Do you think that with more production being moved back to the US, this issue will arise here as well?
Could you repeat that question?
I was trying to catch on to it one more time, Courtney.
That was a little
So
deep.
it's a question
that was a little deep for the last question.
Audit fatigue.
So audit fatigue, I'm assuming that when most of the brands have auditors that are in Asia and Central America and Mexico. And there's also auditors for the military fabrics, and there's audit fatigue. But I would say that there's less audit fatigue in the United States because there's a lot more trust factor when you're dealing with US supply companies. And so I wouldn't expect to see as much audit fatigue when you're dealing with United States companies as you would be if you're dealing with companies in overseas. Plus less travel.
Yeah.
Well, that's the nice thing too about, a local transparent supply chain is there's more likely that somebody will literally knock on your door down there that's from our supply chain to come see you, unlike the chances of me going over to Pakistan or Bangladesh to see the mill that's producing that quote organic cotton. That's probably not going to happen.
I mean, for us, if there's a t-shirt problem now, or there's a sweatshirt, or even for automotive fabrics, if there's a problem, we can have people just come into the conference room from start to finish. Yep. So everybody can meet, here and resolve the problem very quickly. And we've had that happen.
When you have problems?
But not at Carolina Cotton Works. It's the garment dryer.
There you go.
Well, all right. So we're 4 minutes to 1 o'clock. So we're going to wrap it up. There's Eric. I just want to thank Stacey and Eric so much. Stacey in particular for letting us visit and taking his time and telling us all about what's going on at Carolina Cotton Works, and great insight into the domestic textile industry. So we're going to be continuing the harvest next month on April 14th. As I mentioned, we'll be at Opportunity Threads, which is a worker-owned cut and sew business. And then we'll be wrapping up the series of the harvest in May. We'll be going to TS Designs, where the garment dyeing happens.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to flip the tables on Eric. He's going to be the interviewee. He's going to give us a tour of the dye house. And so I am in a minute, when I am done talking, I'm going to post a bunch of links, including where you can RSVP for these events. So if you want to learn more about our 10,000 pounds of cotton project, you can go to solidstate.clothing. That's the Solid State Clothing website. we've got a great short video about the project there. We've also, the 10,000 pounds of cotton project is now open to businesses and brands who are interested in wholesale. So we have options for custom printing and also private label. So you can reach out to Eric directly. He would love to hear from you. Eric@tsdesigns.com is his email address. He seriously answers his own email. And keep up with the project that we're working on here and what we're up to by following TS Designs and Solid State on social media, and sign up for our email list, which you can do on both websites. And thank you everyone so much for joining us. Great questions, a really great conversation today. Thank you so much.
Good job, Courtney. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great, safe day. Appreciate it. Now we'll